Miss you already. So we're going to do things a little differently today, and we're going to have a video lesson starring me and my very special guest, Juno. Isn't she a cute special guest? And this is just a reminder to make sure you are listening just like regular class, and you're listening to the sub and working your very best. Yeah, not snoozing like this. Cool? Cool. All right, guys, so our new unit is going to be on decimals. I know you've seen decimals in the real world. You've seen them in money. Well, just like money and just like the fraction unit that we just got finished with, decimals can also represent part of a whole. So let's look at this first decimal. I read this as 15 and 67 hundredths. Every time you read a decimal, when you see the decimal point, you say and. We've got our tens and ones place. You're familiar with that, just like regular whole numbers. And then after the decimal point, you've got your tenths, then your hundredths. The last place value of this decimal is hundredths. That's why I read it as 15 and 67 hundredths. Kind of like having $15.67. I would have 6 dimes, 7 hundredths, 7 pennies, right? Well, it takes 100 pennies to make $1. So maybe that will help you remember that the hundredths place is after the tenths place in decimals because pennies are smaller than dimes. Now we're going to look at a decimal in a place value chart. To the left of our decimal is my whole number. To the right of our decimal are my tenths and my hundredths. These represent parts that are less than 1. Decimals are less than 1 whole. If I wanted to read this decimal, I would read this as 1 and 56 hundredths. So we're going to discuss the place value of each underlined digit. I'm going to read the question, give you time to think, and you can say the answers out loud before I give you the answer. So this first one is 0.78. What do you think the 7 is in? It is 1 place after the decimal point, so it is in the tenths place. Notice when you are writing decimal names, decimals end in the THS. That distinguishes whole numbers from decimals. Our next one is 0.89. It is 2 places from the decimal point, so this 9 is in the hundredths. I would read this decimal as 0 and 89 hundredths. This 1 is in the tens place. Now notice this is just the regular tens place. This is before the decimal point, so it's a regular whole number. Just make sure that you spell tens normally, but when you're talking about the decimal place, it's tenths. So for this next part, you're going to need a partner. Juno, will you be my partner? Yeah, she'll be my partner. Your partner is going to be someone at your table. So what you're going to do is I'm going to show a slide that has some decimals with place values underlined. One of my friends in class is going to pause the video while you guys work on this, and then the next part, when she unpauses it, is going to have the answers. All right. Okay, so here's your partner activity. You have 4 different decimals with a different place value underlined in each. Now would be a good time to pause the video and write and discuss with your partner. All right. About to go to the answer slide. Here we go. Check your answers with your friend. $5.25. I read this as 5 and 25 hundredths. 5 in the ones place, and then after the decimal point we have our tenths and then our hundredths, 25 hundredths. 5 ones is represented by 5 entire shapes shaded. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 holes, which represent my 5 ones. But then I have 25 hundredths. Every single shape contains 100 little squares. In this shape, 25 are shaded out of 100 to represent the 25 hundredths. Every row is 10, so I could count up to 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 to get my hundreds. So one row is 10, and I have 2 shaded, which represents my 2 tenths. This next row only has 5 shaded, and remember there's 100 in all, so this is just 5 hundredths. So this model is my 5 and 25 hundredths. Here I have a decimal represented by a model. There are 4 shaded out of 10. There is not an entire square shaded. That means there's no whole number in this decimal. So I'm just going to represent that with a 0, then my decimal point. Since there are 4 shaded out of 10, I'm going to put a 4 in the tenths place. This shape is not broken down into 100ths, so I'm not going to put anything in the hundredths place. My answer is just 0.4 or 4 tenths. However, since there is no hundreds, I could put a 0 in the hundredths place, and that does not change that decimal's value. 0.4 is the same thing as 0.40 because 4 tenths is equivalent to 40 hundredths. If you look at both of these shapes, this one is 4 shaded out of 10, this one is 40 shaded out of 100. These are equivalent because they have the same value, the same parts shaded. Let's look at another model. Just like the last one, there's not an entire square shaded, so I still have no whole numbers. So I put a 0 in my ones place, then my decimal. However, for this one, I don't have an entire group of 10. Because remember, each row is a group of 10. I don't have a full group of 10 yet, so I'm going to put a 0 in my tenths place. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 shaded out of 100, so I'm going to put a 7 in the hundredths place. That makes the answer for this 0.07, and I read that as 7 hundredths. For this decimal, I do have a whole number because I have an entire square shaded. So my whole number for this is going to be 1 whole. And remember, each row is a 10. So when I'm figuring out this part, I can just count by tens and say 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. That's 6 groups of tens, so that's 6 tenths. And then I have an additional 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hundredths. So this entire decimal is 1 and 65 hundredths.
Hi! So for this next part, some decimal models are going to come up on the screen, and you're going to write down what decimal you think that model represents. These slides are going to be around 25 seconds long, and then the answer will be on the next slide, so you can check yourself. But if you think you need a little bit more time, feel free to have a friend pause the video as often as you need to. Hello again. So your next activity is that you're going to do another color by number. You're going to be given different models and you're going to write down the decimal that it represents. If you need help during this activity, that's cool.